Yeah, let me just see if I testing or when it works in the middle. I'll connect to the mic. All right, we're going to start.
Boker Tov, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay. This week's Parsha is Korach. Excuse me. The Parsha begins by Korach and Yitzhak and Kohath ben Levi. So, by Yikach, who did he take? What did he take here? It should say Vayamo that he stood to make his speech, or Vayorev, he's going to argue with Moshe. The Torah here indicates a great psychological idea that applies to human beings. I've said often, the Torah says, as Sefer told us, Sodom, this is the book of humankind. This is a book about people. It's a book about people, it never is a book about perfection. Because people, by their very existence, are imperfect. And they're different. So did Moshe expect that the vote would be 100-0? And Moshe is well aware from the beginning that there's Dasan Ba'aviram by the Jewish people, that they don't want him. He hears all the time, he knows there's an Erev Rav. And then the incident last week, he knows that they don't want to go there to Israel. So what is he so upset here? What does he expect? If you get 50.1% of the vote, you're the president. Even though half the country doesn't want you. And that's always been the system. David HaMelech didn't have unanimous support. Shlomo at the end of his life certainly didn't have unanimous support. And throughout the ages, Rashi, his own grandson, tells him, your parish isn't up to snuff. You have too much medrash, not enough pshat. How do you say that to Rashi? And the Rambam, they burn his books. And you go throughout all of Jewish history. All of the leaders of the Jewish people still Beit Knesset on a seat. You don't have 100%. So what's the issue here? And Moshe makes such a tumult. In Bria Yivra, you got to create a special creation that from Maaseh Bereishis, they have to be swallowed alive. And we cannot say that it's a personal peak of Moshe. Because Moshe is on of Moshe Moshe is not interested in his own honor here or in his own glory. Moshe tells them, your complaints are not to me and Aaron, your complaints are to God. What do you want from us? We're just standing here. So you have to look at this incident that the Torah describes for us and devotes so much narrative to it as somehow being a definition as to the behavior of human beings. That's what the Torah concentrates on it so much. The Meiser Ego, the golden calf, yeah, we expect golden calves. We know that people construct their own gods. We're not nervous about that. Even the daughters of Moab, we know, men like women. We know what happens. We even understand, I don't want to go there. It's just, oh, yeah, I knew for whatever reasons that were discussed last week. But what's the rub here? What lies at the heart of this problem? So there are many different streams of thought amongst the Meforshim as to how to look at this story. And to complicate the story, at the end, the Torah tells us, "B'nei Korach lo mesu." The descendants of Korach did not die. Like they were not participants. And in fact, on Rosh Hashanah, before the sounding of the shofar, we say, "Lamatseach libnei Korach mizmor." We're going to repeat the prayer of the descendants of Korach. Why should we do that? Can't find in the 150 chapters of Tehillim a fitting psalm without bringing in Korach. So, in the great sophistication and subtlety that Torah always provides, there are many different ideas that are raised by the Meforshim over the centuries here. And all of them are correct. But some of them are more applicable in some times than in other times. And some of them are more applicable to certain people than to other people. So Rashi says, what did he take? He took himself. We would say in the vernacular of English, he took himself very seriously. He had no sense of humor about himself. And therefore, that's why the Torah lists his lineage. You know who I am. Ben Yitzhar, Ben Kos, Ben Levi. I'm royal blood. I'm the greatest. So my experience in life is that the greater the introduction to the speaker, the less you're going to enjoy it. There was a time in America when it was sufficient to say, ladies and gentlemen, which today you can't say anymore either. All of you's President of the United States. That's it. You don't say he got a PhD, or he graduated, he was a senator, he was a governor, he won the election. They don't say any of that. The office itself, so to speak, speaks for itself. Now, we find this same general tendency of thinking very highly of oneself to the extent that one feels superior to others. And then when you feel superior to others, eventually you feel superior to God himself, because you know better. We find that we're going to have it in the Parsha of Bilam. Before Bilam gets going, he says, Num Agevesh Sumayin, Num Bilam Ben Boar. He tells you all of his titles. You know who's talking to you? I'm the great Bilam. So the Torah warns us about taking ourselves that seriously. Because when that happens, so naturally we resent the fact that we are not the leader of the people, we are not the wealthiest, we're not everybody listens to us. We resent all of that. Because I'm so smart and I know exactly what to do. So what it's a chutzpah on your part not to do what I want. And that's what Korach tells Moshe. What's a Moshe? Kol ha'edo kulam kedoshim. Everybody is holy. You say you're the holiest? Everybody's holy. But who are you? And you've been Amram, and and you appoint your relatives. Who made you that? Who gave you that? Especially when in his heart's heart he feels that he could do a better job and that he should be the leader of the people. So Korach took himself. The first step towards this degradation is taking yourself. And therefore, a tragedy must ensue. It always does. Now, Rashi points out here, he quotes the famous Gemara, the Medrash, Korach who was a wise man. Now, there are people who are foolish. They're idiots. There's a bit of idiocy within each and every one of us. It's to the extent that we can control it and not express it. Well, yesterday, I take a cab to the hospital every morning for the therapy. But I had a cab driver yesterday that was an expert in every field of human endeavor. He was a diplomat, a politician, an economist, a Torah scholar, and he insisted on sharing his wisdom with me. So one of the things that he said, he's the cab driver, remember. He says to me, I'm blind in one eye. He's driving 100 kilometers an hour. He tells me he's blind in one eye. You don't hear what you say. So Korach was a pikeach, Rashi says. He was a smart man. He wasn't an idiot. Maror l'shtus kazed. And what made him do this stupid thing? So Rashi quotes the Medrash. He saw Beruach HaKodesh. He had Ruach HaKodesh. He had spiritual powers, godly intuition. That Shemimenu Yetzei Shmuel Hanavi, that his descendant would be the great prophet Shmuel, who is equal to Moshe and Aaron. Moshe Aaron b'chol hanavu, Shmuel b'korei shmo. So he said to himself, if that's my grandchild, you can imagine who I am. I always tell the story about here in Shul about our Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Aumann, who should live and be well. So the Shul made a Kiddush in his honor after he won the Nobel Prize, maybe 15 years ago, something like that. So they asked me to say a few words. So I said, if Dr. Aumann is of the caliber of the members of our shul, can you just imagine what the rabbi must be? So that's what Pikeach, that's what he said to himself. He made a kal v'chomer for himself. If my grandson is Shmuel Hanavi and my grandson is the equal of Moshe and Aaron, then certainly I'm entitled to more than what I'm getting here. I certainly am in a higher state. So it's an interesting point that all the Meforshim say, how did he have Ruach HaKodesh? If he's full of gava, pride and hubris and arrogance. And what do you mean Ruach HaKodesh? And the answer is that people often have Ruach HaKodesh, and it has nothing to do with who they are or what they are. It's just a state of being. So from here we learn a great lesson, that you do not live your life according to Ruach HaKodesh. You get up in the morning and say, I had a dream and the Lord said to me, blah, 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 blah. So maybe yes, maybe no, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to put on film that morning. The Gemara tells us about the Melech, Chizkiyahu HaMelech, king of Yehuda. So the Gemara says that he was such a great tzaddik. Lo nirasa keshes biyomov. There never had to be a rainbow, because if you saw Chizkiyahu, you didn't need the rainbow to know that there was a God in the world. And Chizkiyahu, the Gemara says, Rotza Kodesh Baruch Hu Melech HaMashiach. He was of the caliber to be the Messiah himself. So we have here a very great man. Probably after David and Shlomo, he's the greatest of the kings of Yehuda, if we can make any judgments. So the Tanakh tells us, the Navi Yeshayahu was his uncle. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. It's his father-in-law. Yeshaya came to him and the king was ill. And the Navi told him, you're not going to get off this bed. And Chizkiyahu was determined to live. So he knew that the decree against him that he would pass away was because some sin he may have incurred. So he asked him, what happened? Well, why? So the Talmud teaches us that the Yeshaya told him it's because you never married and you don't have any children. So Chizkiah said, you know why I never married? Why I don't have children? Because I saw Baruch HaKodesh that the child that comes from me will be a great sinner. So I didn't want that. So I decided I wouldn't have any children. And Yeshaya answered him, Bahadi de Kapshe Rachmon Olam Aloch. Listen, my friend, things that are hidden in heaven have nothing to do with you. You have mitzvahs to perform. You have halacha to cling to. You have earthly responsibilities. You don't live your life on Ruach HaKodesh. And there are people that have that idea that somehow they have Ruach HaKodesh. And that inspires them to do things. Now, that's not to deny that Chas v'Sholem, there's no such thing as Ruach HaKodesh. Just the opposite, there is. But the lesson here is that we don't perform our lives according to mysteries, according to all sorts of ideas that we cannot control, and that we really don't have any handle on them. And therefore, for instance, in the history of the Jewish people, one of the great debacles was that of Shapsai Tzvi, who in 1653 claimed to be the Messiah. And for 5 years, they put up with him. And it's estimated that a third of the Jewish people followed him. And great rabbis followed him. And he based it all on Ruach HaKodesh. So with Ruach HaKodesh, he said, this Aveira we're going to cancel Tisha B'Av, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. All on Ruach HaKodesh. Chazal tell us that the line between sanity and insanity is a very blurred one. It's not sharp. Because a person that is not sane isn't dealing really with reality. Though that person is convinced that his or her behavior is the reality. That the idea is the reality. So that's what happened to Korach. That's one of the ideas that what happened to him. He went off the rails because of the fact that, he was so spiritual that he just. Once a young man called me up very late at night. I was in bed already. And he wants information about this young woman that he wants to date. It's like 12:30 at night. I'm not interested in the social life. He asks all this, the usual nonsensical questions that don't have anything to do with anything. And then at the end, he says to me, Rabbi, can I ask you one more thing? Is she spiritual? I said, I hope not. Spiritual is dangerous, very dangerous. But it's very attractive. You see in our world too, how attractive it is. How many scandals, unfortunately, have occurred from people who are spiritual because they live to a different standard. And that's why Chazal say, B'nai Korach lo mesu, how do we know that the descendants of Korach didn't die? The Gemara says, Mokum nisbatzra lahem begehenim. They have like a castle in the bowels of the earth. And from there emanates their cry, Moshe emet, v'torato emet. Moshe was true, and his Torah was true, meaning that's the real life. In the real life, Moshe, you follow what Moshe says. The Torah is true. Because if you, again, are determined to be Ruach HaKodesh, and then there can be great problems that occur. That's a hard lesson to learn. Last point, just one more idea that the Meforshim, there are Meforshim, I don't want to go into it because it's a lecture you didn't pay for. That some of the events that are recorded for us with Avram Avinu, let's say, were dreams that Avram had, not necessarily, factual. He dreamt it. Now, that's a very dangerous track. But that's was the great dispute amongst the Meforshim as to how far we can use allegory and how far we are bound to reality. But there is one, there are a number of commentaries from very great people that say that the whole story of the Akedah was a dream. Because it's impossible that God would tell him to sacrifice his son. He dreamt the whole thing. Because he dreamt it the way he dreamt, it became our schus, became our merit. But in the real world, the Torah governs. And the Torah does not allow you to sacrifice your child. So, underlying this story of Korach are these underpinnings of faith. Korach believed in himself. If you believe in yourself, you think you have Ruach HaKodesh. If you think you have Ruach HaKodesh, you don't have to do what the Torah tells you to do because you're smarter. You're greater. So even though Korach Pikeach Hoya, even though he was this wise, smart, accomplished person, he committed this shtus, this foolish act, because the nature of human beings is that the foolishness stalks all of us. And because of that, that's why the Torah goes into the detail and gives us an entire lineage, etc., so we can learn these lessons from it. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for coming. Next week, God willing, we'll be in business again.
Sorry about all the. Mike died in the middle, that's why I put my phone here for backup audio and not I'm giving me more work to fix the chair. What's the title of it?
Yeah.
Parsha's reality. I'm personally going to all the elected, and I'm supposed to put up on the right. I can keep up that being. Islamic Jews of the Islamic. Once I finish all the countries, I want to go. It seems like Berlin is getting the most views. Berlin is getting the most views. Does that make sense? More than mundane.
I would imagine. Because Berlin is essential to the Europe today.
The one problem I have, a lot of the stories I already know from my father. I'm hearing them again. My father just quoted Rabbi Wein in his Parsha Shiur this week about the commercial with fish and beer.
Yeah.
And he said 30 years ago. And then he said, Moshe Rabbeinu said, Klal didn't understand Moshe Rabbeinu until 40 years. He said, I'm almost understanding my Rabbi. Could I send a message to my father? Okay.
Wow. I wish I understand, but I have the same information. And it was happy. The resident shut up the tank and considering the hassle, how they were there. It was for 2 weeks. We're going back to the US.
So that thing that was not. I need everything going. The more frustrating, it's time to stop. It's yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. You go and get them this off. No. No. It's a big problem for those who haven't. Like, it's a problem.